My family came from a place called Malawa, Poland. In 1939, at the beginning of September, Poland was invaded by the German army. And they immediately took over Malawa, which was one of the first cities to fall to the Germans. The ironic thing is that I was born on September 20th of that month.
Wow.
So my father celebrated a birth of a new life, and he was going to be mourning the loss of virtually his entire family in the next 4 years.
I mean, how does your family move on from something like that?
The experience of my family who survived the war was shared with me. They lectured in high schools, and they discussed their past lives in the camps with me from the time I was 9 years old. But I think that in general, most people don't want to talk about their experiences, and not to their children or their family. My family was numerous. They lived in a small town. They had a linseed oil factory, and that's how they made a living. My cousin was one of the younger children of 9 children in Malawa. The entire family, by the end of the war, had perished except for 3. My cousin Eli was sent to a DP camp with his new wife, Anna, in Germany. It was called Fehrenwald, and he lived there until 1949. The other 2 of his cousins fled to Tashkent, where it was called Food City. And Food City was not a joke, it was a reality, because people were starving to death in Europe. In fact, more people, I've read, starved to death in Europe during World War II than died from the war or from action in the military. Eli came to America. My father sponsored him and his wife and child, Faye, and they came to Lincoln, Nebraska, where I was born. I had half of a European family, and the other half of my family was an American family. They had come to Omaha, Nebraska in 1869, and my cousin wrote a book about our family called But You're Different. The title is very telling because Jewish families in Nebraska were rather a small community. My great-great-grandfather was the first Jew to come to Nebraska, to Omaha. To my father, who came from Europe, he learned English. He was able to take care of himself and his first family. He had a wife, and he also had a daughter, my half-sister, Ruth, who was 29 years older than I. Most of my cousins that I played with were my second cousins, not my first cousins. So I was that generation behind. So my first cousins used to babysit me. He had come to the States in 1900, and he came with a sister and a brother. His sister stayed in New York. His brother settled in Chicago. And my father came to Council Bluffs, Iowa. I haven't got a clue why my father came to Council Bluffs, Iowa, other than I remember asking him why he left New York, and he said, because I worked in a sweatshop for 16 or 18 hours a day as a tailor. And because of the life I was leading, I felt that it would be better for me to be in a new place, in a small place, where I could be somebody, rather than his philosophy was he'd rather be a big fish in a small pond than a little fish in a big pond. And I always remembered that. He lost everything in 1929 in the crash when my sister was 18 years old. And he was able to remarry, have a child, and make his fortune back after he was 60 years old. I think that then the loss of his family, he kept under wraps. I never knew how he felt about the loss of his family. I never saw him cry about it. He was a solid rock. I was so angry for the first 20 years of my life because I felt I had been shortchanged. Because my mother and father divorced when I was 4. But now that I am a grandparent and I look back on my life, I know that I was probably very fortunate. I had a whole family in Omaha, where my mother and I moved after my father left my mother, and they took care of me and my mother. And we came to California when I was 13 years old, and my mother had 2 sisters in Los Angeles, and they took care of us until I went off to college. So I want my children to know this, and I want my grandchildren to know this, and my great-grandchildren, because even though you don't grow up with a happy attitude or things aren't going right when you're young, you can always change that. Because in my life, I have been one of the most fortunate people I know. I've had a great life. I've traveled all over the world. I have an art business and a rare book business that gave me a chance to meet people from Europe, Japan, Mexico, South America, who collect. And I have been exposed to a lot of different personalities. I never dreamed that when I was in Omaha, Nebraska, that I was ever going to be anything or achieve anything like I have. My family talked against my father a lot and tried to poison my mind against my father. But I was crazy about my father. And you know, I can't even tell you why. All I can tell you is that for some reason I adored the ground he walked on. Every Saturday, he would listen to the Metropolitan Opera. And I usually was with him. Because he was a tailor, he had an artistic background. He could make a suit by just looking at you.
Wow.
He would measure you, and he would cut out a suit without a pattern, put it together. He had a good eye. He could just size up everybody. My mother didn't have much of an education. She was a very simple person. She was a homemaker. She was always home when I came home from school. But she was an ill person. She was born with a lot of physical problems, and she got sick easily. She really didn't have an opinion about me going to college. My father was the one that said, "You're going to college. Your sister went to college, and you are going to college." And I was all for that. I felt that that was the only way that I was ever going to escape the situation I was in with a broken family. Probably my sister also was, she made all of her own clothes because she couldn't afford to buy the things that were in Vogue magazine. So she would copy the patterns and the clothes from Vogue, and she would make them for herself. And I ended up majoring in art in college, and then later I went back to school and became an art historian, because the theory is that when you find out how bad of an artist you are, you therefore tend to study about great art by other people. I had a good eye, and I think, like my father, I could size up an image of whether I wanted to buy it, whether I wanted to invest it, whether it was good for somebody, whether it was a fake or it was real, if it was a copy, if it's a reproduction.
Wow.
I can tell pretty much all those things. Let's say in an antique store, you have a multitude of items. You could have 1,000 items around you, and I can head towards the item that is the rarest, the best made, the finest craftsmanship, just by instinct.
Cool.
When I was working on my thesis, I had a friend who did an exhibit of English prints, and for his master's, and he put it in our little gallery at San Jose State University. So, and I said, well, I don't know anything about drawings. We never studied drawings and prints in school. We studied frescoes, painting, sculpture, architecture, architectural styles, but we never studied drawings for paintings or prints that influence an artist to make that saw a work of art and then drew or made a print from that, like the woodcut I showed you, the Durer woodcut. And so he said, well, he got most of the prints that he used in the exhibit from Stanford, the museum. And he suggested to me that I go to Stanford and meet the curator, Betsy Freiberger, and that she was always very willing to share her experience and her knowledge with people who were interested in doing something with the real thing. So I went to Stanford and I helped Betsy with a couple, 3 exhibits, and at the time there was an exhibit we worked on for Honoré Daumier, who was one of the great caricaturists in France in the 19th century. So, and then I decided to go to Europe, and she gave me a bucket list of dealers who I should go and see, museums that collected prints and drawings besides paintings and sculpture. And so I went on my way to London and Paris, and I bought things that I thought I could bring back and sell. And that's how I got started. I think I was probably 30. You have to understand, I had no idea this is what I was going to do. I thought I was going to teach in junior college.
Wow.
Because having children, it would be too difficult for me to try to get a PhD. I'd have to go to Berkeley. Well, it gave me independence. I have to say that I was very lucky that the 2 men I was married to, not at the same time, supported me in my education. Aaron supported me to go to graduate school. And so he let me have a housekeeper, and I could take the kids to a babysitter when they were very young until Jordan was about 7 or 8 years old. With my second husband, I wasn't going to school, but I was already pretty well established in my art business and the rare book business. But he was very supportive of me being in that business. When we met, I asked him, when you travel for business in Europe, what do you do on the weekends when everybody is not working? Now, what do you do with yourself? And he says, oh, I go to a museum. And I thought, my God, this guy is meant for me.
Wow.
So it was a match made in heaven. And I found my soulmate. It took me a while, but I found my soulmate. We decided to get married when I was a senior, in the middle of my senior year. So I probably lasted longer than most other girls because most of them were already on their second kid by the time they were 21. I was 25 when Michael was born, and I was 28 when Jordan was born. There were no babies in my life up until the time I had a baby. So my experience with children was very limited. I was an only child. Having a child was like, what do I do with this kid? I had no experience with little boys at all. It was a learning experience all the way down the line. Since Aaron was a pharmacist and was in medicine, he pretty much knew what to do if the kids got sick. That was great help. He was amazing. He knew exactly what to do when the children got sick. He knew when to go to the doctor. He knew what doctor we should go to. We always had the best medical care in this valley. It was tough being a parent. Essentially, I was alone. We moved up here from LA. I didn't have any family here whatsoever. My husband was a workaholic. He worked 16 hours a day. So I was the primary cook, bottle washer, dishwasher, driver. I was everything. All the responsibility really fell on my shoulders. I never denied the children anything. Whatever club they wanted to belong to, whatever they wanted to do, any toys they wanted, any clothes they needed, any extra help, anything they needed for all of us, he would give us anything. In Yiddish, we call it beschert. It means destined to be. When I met Murray in a restaurant in Paris, I fell in love with him from almost the moment I met him. The difference between he and Murray was, I was with Murray 24 hours a day. We pretty much worked at our separate businesses together in an office or here at the home. We traveled together.
Wow.
We went through waiting for planes together. We went through cancellations together. We went through a few times when he would get sick or I would get sick on a trip, or going to a conference or a television market or an art fair or a book fair. We fit together like gloves. It was amazing that we put up with each other so well. Both Aaron and Murray had a great sense of humor. I don't think I could be with a man who didn't make me laugh. And that's what I miss most now. But he was a bon vivant. He was a raconteur. He was a entrepreneur. He was confident in everything he did, everywhere he went. Everybody knew him. We'd walk down the street in New York, and people would stop and say, "Hey, Murray, how are you?" And like out of the blue, here we are in a city with 10 million people. He had some very important clients. He had the New York Times. He had Subaru. He had the Women's Garment League. And in the television business, when we started, Discovery Channel was starting up, and we licensed a lot of programming to them.
Wow.
He was a top-notch guy who got things done, and everybody that knew him knew that he was reliable, honest, and a gentleman. I think that what he did for people is that he made them feel important.
Mm-hmm.
When you were with Murray, you were important. Murray definitely gave me the confidence to like myself, like I had never liked myself before. And it was a wonderful thing to be anywhere with him.
Mm.
And we never fought.
Wow.
We never argued. The only time we argued, finally, was the last 2 years of his life.
Yeah.
And you know what our argument was about? He wanted to come home. And I couldn't take care of him. And it broke my heart that he would cry when I left. With Jimmy, I was on my way to Israel for the 10th or 15th time, and I was in first class. And I was sitting there, and everybody had gotten on the plane except the person who was going to sit next to me. And I thought, oh gosh, maybe I'm going to fly all the way to Israel from Los Angeles by myself. I have 2 seats, I can move over and I'll sit by the window and that'll be great. And all of a sudden, a young man is assisting an elderly man down the aisle. And he's very disheveled, he's got shorts on, he's got a cap on, baseball cap on, and he's wearing like a tennis jacket and tennis shirt. And I said, oh my gosh. And I'm looking around. There are no empty seats except the one next to me. And I thought, oh my God, he's going to sit next to me. He did sit next to me. And David, his son, said to me, don't worry about him. He's okay. He's really okay. And I'm going, oh my gosh. And he says, I can't sit in first class with him. I have to go back and sit in economy. And I looked at David, his son, and I said, don't worry. I'll take care of him. If there's anything that he needs, I'll come and get you. It turned out that it was Jimmy Haskell. And Jimmy Haskell, I did not know, even though I'd been in the television industry for 20 years, because he was in music. Jimmy Haskell sat next to me for 17 hours, all the way to Israel. And it was the best trip, other than the ones I ever took with Murray, that I ever had. He told me about his life and all the people that he had been with and met. He told me he was on his way to conduct the orchestra for Jose Feliciano. And ironically, he was conducting the Ra'anana Orchestra, and that's where I was staying in Israel, was in Ra'anana. And we became fast friends. They invited me to come to the concert.
Wow.
In Tel Aviv, and I said, I'm staying with friends and I can't go anywhere without my friends. And they said, bring them along, it's fine. So the couple that I was staying with and I went to the concert. Jimmy wore a tuxedo. He came out on the stage. He conducted that orchestra like he had conducted orchestras for the last 50 years. He was just as young as he was 50 years ago. the man who got on the plane was not the man on the stage. He acquired the persona of who Jimmy Haskell was in front of thousands of people. And nobody would have ever known that this guy that looked like he was going to fall apart stood up, all 6 feet of him, and conducted that orchestra in front of a couple thousand people in Tel Aviv.
Wow.
And we continued to be friends until he passed away. But there's archives, huge archive of his work as a conductor, arranger, and 150 awards, platinum records, gold records, everything. He didn't have a musical education per se. He didn't go to Carnegie, or he didn't go to Berkeley, you know, these great music universities that exist in America.
That's
He
because
was self-taught in so many ways. He was a musical genius. Josh definitely added so much to our family and to me. He's just been the jewel in our lives. It was the first time that both Murray and I had the experience of watching a child grow from day to day. And I was the family babysitter. I always took care of Josh if Jordan and Patty wanted to go somewhere. They never hired a babysitter. In fact, one day, when Josh was about 4 or 5, I said to him, "Do you know what a babysitter is, Josh?" And he said, "No." And I said, "You're looking at her." But when Murray became ill and he had to go to skilled nursing, and Josh would come and visit, and not always did Josh want to come and visit. What little kid wants to go to a skilled nursing facility? But his mother was very supportive of Murray and me, and she told him that we don't know how long Grandpa's going to be with us, and so we had to go and visit him. And I appreciated that. That was a wonderful thing for her to say and do. But the most wonderful thing of all is that when Josh walked in that door, Murray would light up like a candle. He would break out in a smile. He would be beaming when Josh walked in. It was the cure-all for all of the agonies that he had to go through those last couple of years. I want to talk to my children, because sometimes I think that my children think that I don't appreciate them. And I have to tell you, in my own simple way, that you mean everything to me. Because without you, I wouldn't be the person that I am. From you, I learned how to be sympathetic. From you, I learned how to be patient. From you, I learned that there is hope, that you can overcome anything in life. From you, I have received joy. And from you, I have received pain. But overall, it was an experience. It was a great ride. And we did it together. And we always did it together. And I am forever grateful for you, both of you, because you've been a guiding light in many ways for me. So thank you, Mike and Jordan.
Aww.
You are the reason I'm sitting here today.
Wow.
The poem that I would like to read to you is very special to me because it says a lot about me and it says a lot about him. The title is Ode to Sandy, O-D-E. What is Ode to Sandy? O-W-E-D. And how old is Sandy? O-L-D. And it was written for my birthday. Let me pay tribute to my second wife, who helped me to enter a new kind of life, who beckoned me to the land of plums and trees and pears and endless sunshine and golden bears. To a myriad of friends from east to west, whose age will not wither and time will not best. Of books and art, she's given me knowledge, plus 2 new sons, both fresh from college. My fellow traveler to distant shores, my nocturnal wanderer from her husband's snores. My companion, my counselor, my bookkeeper mate, and by candlelight each evening, my beautiful date. But of all the gifts from Sandy to me, the best of all is the one that's free. Free to choose and free to err. Free to say, please count me out. So here's to you, my Sandy sprite, who's given me youth and a second flight, who laughs at all my jokes, though told more than twice, and cares about my cares and makes them all nice. I thank you, my dear, and wish you great joy and many happy birthdays from your own lover boy. Murray.
Wow.
Beautiful, isn't it?
What does that mean to you?
Everything. It says everything that we were, everything that we were, everything we still are.